Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita. We're reading from Adi Lila, chapter 1. We're going to be beginning from verse 54 today. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamam bande Shri Gurum Dinitarinam Paramananda Madham Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. What appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy, for nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of a real light in the shadows, for in the light there are neither shadows nor reflections. But in the previous verse, the absolute truth and its nature have been explained. One must understand the relative truth to actually know this absolute. The relative truth, which is called Maya or material energy, is explained here. Maya has no independent existence. One who is less intelligent is captivated by the wonderful activities of Maya, but he does not understand that behind these activities is the direction of the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.10, it is said, Maya Dhyakshena Prakriti Suyate Characharam. The material energy nature is working and producing moving and non-moving beings only by the supervision of Krishna. The real nature of Maya, the illusory existence of the material manifestation, is clearly explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. The absolute truth is substance, and the relative truth depends upon its relationship with the absolute for its existence. Maya means energy, therefore the relative truth is explained to be the energy of the absolute truth. Since it is difficult to understand the distinction between the absolute and relative truths, an analogy can be given for clarification. The absolute truth can be compared to the sun, which is appreciated in terms of two relative truths, reflection and darkness. Darkness is the absence of sunshine, and a reflection is a projection of sunlight into darkness. Neither darkness nor reflection has an independent existence. Darkness comes when the sunshine is blocked. For example, if one stands facing the sun, his back will be in darkness. Since darkness stands in the absence of the sun, it is therefore relative to the sun. The spiritual world is compared to the real sunshine, and the material world is compared to the dark regions where the sun is not visible. When the material manifestation appears very wonderful, this is due to a perverted reflection of the Supreme Sunshine, the absolute truth as confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra. Whatever one can see here has its substance in the absolute. As darkness is situated far away from the sun, so the material world is also far away from the spiritual world. The Vedic literature directs us not to be captivated by the dark regions, tamaha, but to try to reach the shining regions of the absolute, Yogi Dham. The spiritual world is brightly illuminated, but this material world is wrapped up in darkness. In the material world, sunshine, moonshine, or different kinds of artificial light are required to dispel darkness, especially at night. For by nature the material world is dark, therefore the Supreme Lord has arranged for sunshine and moonshine. But in his abode, as described in the Bhagavad Gita 15.6, there is no necessity for lighting by sunshine, moonshine, or electricity, because everything is self-effulgent. That which is relative, temporary, and far away from the absolute truth is called Maya or ignorance. This illusion is exhibited in two ways, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita. The inferior illusion is inert matter, and the superior illusion is the living entity. The living entities are called illusory in this context only because they are implicated in the illusory structures and activities of the material world. Actually, the living entities are not illusory, for they are parts of the superior energy of the Supreme Lord and do not have to be covered by Maya. If they do not want to be so, the actions of the living entities in the spiritual kingdom are not illusory. They are the actual eternal activities of liberated souls. Verse 55. As the material elements enter the bodies of all living beings and yet remain outside them all. I exist within all material creations and yet am not within them. Purport. The gross material elements earth, fire, water, air and ether combine with the subtle material elements mind, intelligence and false ego to construct the bodies of this material world, and yet they are beyond these bodies as well. Any material construction is nothing but an amalgamation or combination of material elements in varied proportions. These elements exist both within and beyond the body. For example, although the sky exists in space, it also enters within the body. Similarly, the Supreme Lord, who is the cause of the material energy, lives within the material world as well as beyond it. Without his presence within the material world, the cosmic body could not develop, just as without the presence of the spirit within the physical body, the body could not develop. The entire material manifestation develops and exists because the Supreme Personality of Godhead enters it as Paramatma or the Super Soul. The Personality of Godhead, in his all-pervading feature of Paramatma, enters every entity from the biggest to the most minute. His existence can be realized by one who has single qualification of submissiveness and who thereby becomes a surrendered soul. The development of submissiveness is the cause of the proportionate spiritual realization by which one can ultimately meet the Supreme Lord in person, as a man meets another man face to face. Because of this, his development of transcendental attachment for the Supreme Lord, a surrendered soul feels the presence of his beloved everywhere, and all his senses are engaged in the loving service of the Lord. His eyes are engaged in seeing the beautiful couple Sri Radha and Krishna sitting on a decorated throne beneath a desire tree in the transcendental land of Vrindavan. His nose is engaged in smelling the spiritual aroma of the lotus feet of the Lord. Similarly, his ears are engaged in hearing messages from Vaikuntha, and his hands embrace the lotus flower of the lotus feet of the Lord and his associates. Thus the Lord is manifested to a pure devotee from within and without. This is one of the mysteries of the devotional relationship, in which a devotee and the Lord are bound by a tie of spontaneous love. To achieve this love should be the goal of life for every living being. Verse 56. A person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. Purport. Those who are serious about the knowledge of the transcendental world, which is far beyond the material cosmic creation, must approach a bona fide spiritual master to learn the science both directly and indirectly. One must learn both the means to approach the desired destination and the hindrances to such progress. The spiritual master knows how to regulate the habits of a neophyte disciple, and therefore a serious student must learn the science in all its aspects from him. There are different grades and standards of prosperity. The standard of comfort and happiness conceived by a man engaged in material labor is the lowest grade of happiness, for it is in relationship with the body. The highest standard of such bodily comfort is achieved by a fruitive worker who by pious activities reaches the plane of heaven or the kingdom of the creative gods with their delegated powers. But the conception of comfortable life in heaven is insignificant in comparison to the happiness enjoyed in the impersonal Brahman, and this Brahmananda, the spiritual bliss derived from impersonal Brahman, is like the water in the hoof print of a calf compared to the ocean of love of Godhead. When one develops pure love for the God, he derives an ocean of transcendental happiness from the association of the personality of Godhead. To qualify oneself to reach this stage of life is the highest perfection. One should try to purchase a ticket to go back home, back to Godhead. The price of such a ticket is one's intense desire for it, which is not easily awakened. Even if one continuously performs pious activities for thousands of lives, all mundane relationships are sure to be broken in the course of time. But once one establishes a relationship with the personality of Godhead in a particular rasa, it is never to be broken even after the annihilation of the material world. One should understand through the transparent medium of the spiritual master that the Supreme Lord exists everywhere in his transcendental spiritual nature, and that the living entities' relationships with the Lords are directly and indirectly existing everywhere, even in the material world. In the material world, there are 5 kinds of relationships with the Supreme Lord: Shanta, Dasya, Sakhya, Vatsalya and Madhurya. The perverted reflections of these rasas are found in the material world. Land, home, furniture, and other inert material objects are related in Shanta, or the neutral and silent sense, whereas servants work in the Dasya relationship. The reciprocation between friends is called Sakhya. The affection of a parent for a child is known as Vatsalya, and the affairs of conjugal love constitute Madhurya. These 5 relationships in the material world are distorted reflections of the original pure sentiments, which should be understood and perfected in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. In the material world, the perverted rasas bring frustration. If these rasas are re-established with Lord Krishna, the result is eternal, blissful life. From this and the preceding 3 verses of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which have been selected from Srimad Bhagavatam, the missionary activities of Lord Chaitanya can be understood. Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses, which are summarized in the 4 verses beginning with Aham Evasam Evagre 53 and concluding with Yat Syat Sarvatra Sarvada 56. In the first of these 3 verses, 53, the transcendental nature of the Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is explained. The second verse, 54, further explains that Lord is detached from the workings of material energy Maya. The living entities, although parts and parcels of Lord Krishna, are prone to be controlled by the external energy. Therefore, although they are spiritual, in the material world they are engaged in bodies of material energy. The eternal relationship of the living entities with the Supreme Lord is explained in that verse. The next verse, 55, instructs that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable energies, is simultaneously one with and different from the living entities and the material energy. This knowledge is called Achintya Bhed Abhed Tattva. When an individual living entity surrenders to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he can then develop natural transcendental love. For him, this surrendering process should be the primary concern of a human being. In the next verse 56, it is said that a conditioned soul must ultimately approach a bona fide spiritual master and try to understand perfectly the material and spiritual worlds and his own existential position. Here the words Anavaya Vyatire Kabhyam indirectly and directly suggests that one must learn the process of devotional service in its 2 aspects. One must directly execute the process of devotional service and indirectly avoid the impediments to progress. So we'll continue from here onwards next time. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.